And just like that, we are back with chapter 66 of The Universe According to Mugsy. I am so excited. This interview has been weeks in the making. We are here at the Village Tavern, where, as you know, I am a waiter. And my friend Caleb Mayo just happened to stumble in for lunch one day, and I heard him talking about such interesting things, I had to pull him back for a deeper conversation. Caleb is all over the internet. He is 4 seasons into his podcast, WTUFO, What the UFO, at WTUFO.com. You can find him, youtube.com/@WhatTheUFO, patreon.com/WTUFO, and spacefare.etsy.com, where he has some unbelievable prints on things, even like comforters. They are so cool. I am so excited to get into this conversation. I want to say quick thanks to the Village Tavern, the Ingemi family, for allowing us to shoot here today. This is such a great location. Hopefully we get some cool people walking by. And Salem, Massachusetts may be a great place to start talking about UFOs. So, your podcast is awesome. I want to first comment on the range of guests that you've had, because especially when we start talking about things that not everybody agrees with, you must have such an open-minded range to be able to have discussions with people that are like doctors and physicists who have a very narrow scope of what they're trying to study and understand, and also be open-minded enough to have conversations with people like Birdie, who is I guess trying to be a remote viewer, but has gotten so good at this.
She's an expert remote viewer. Her name's Birdie Jaworski.
Unbelievable. Birdie Jaworski. That was such a good conversation. I started looking into her as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I don't know where you want to start us off on your story. I know there's so much more to you. You're an actor as well. I've heard plenty of conversations about that. But yeah, the range in the podcast, some of the conversations you've had, anywhere you want to talk about.
Thank you, man. First of all, great to meet you.
Yes,
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a classical actor by training. I grew up doing Shakespeare, and I still do that every now and then. I got a few acting gigs in the next couple of months. I do some performance with a symphony group called Concert Theater Works, that we do like a play with a symphony, basically. So it'll be like the Boston Symphony Orchestra and us prancing around being dumb in front of them. And we're doing Peer Gynt in St. Louis. And then we've got a Romeo and Juliet in Tanglewood this summer. And in the middle, I'll do something with the Boston Early Music Festival, which will be like a combination of sonnets and speeches with early Elizabethan era woodwinds. So I love classical acting. I love drama in general. And that is my background in training. I have a BA in drama from Vassar College a long, long time ago. And then I worked with the Shakespeare Theater in D.C. as kind of like a finishing program. I studied a little bit at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art as part of my undergrad. That was over in London, but just for a semester. And before that, I studied Shakespeare here with a youth group called the Rebel Shakespeare Company. And then local stuff with the Commonwealth Shakespeare and the ART and Shakespeare and Company trainers. So I've like kind of like a rich classical background, and I love doing that stuff. It's my favorite. But I like acting of all kind. I lived in LA for 11, 12 years, something like that. And I did a little bit of very goofy film, little TV, a bunch of commercials. Just learned about the industry and auditions and production, and got to be around that stuff and really like it. And have aspirations to do more in that direction. So I'm looking to do indie film around here in the next few years. Put cards on the table about my life. I'm back in Marblehead, Massachusetts, because I care for my mom, who had a quite serious stroke like 5 years ago.
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you very much. She's got some serious physical deficits, so it's like a very hands-on caregiving role, and that's been fascinating and extremely challenging. And it has also required that I sort of pivot my creative activities to something that can be home-based. So I do this show, WTUFO, you were mentioning, remotely with my guests all over like video calls. And that is the result of a couple years of falling down the UFO rabbit hole. Did you want to stop or jump in for anything there?
No, please continue. Let's do it. That's the acting background. I've heard you talk plenty about it. I didn't realize how much you were still engaged with it. And now it makes a lot more sense why you've come home and trying to find that thing to work at home. Absolutely. Your production, unbelievable. Yeah, let's get into the UFO stuff.
Thank you. Okay, so UFOs are a fascinating topic, and they're... do you look over here? Do you
Occasionally. Sometimes I do. We can do whatever. I do most of these solo casts. My audience, very small, is very casual, kind of. We interweave comedy and we're all shooting the shit.
Okay, I wish I were funnier. I would interweave more. But,
that's exactly the only lack of weaving in is my ability to produce it.
Hard limit on that. Okay, so UFOs. UFOs are super interesting, but they're so complicated and complex as a topic that everybody's at a different place in them. So, like, picking something like superstring theory, it's like a really sort of simple spectrum of what everybody knows. So most of us don't know much. Some people know a lot. UFOs are, it's like a thicker bandwidth of people who know a little, people who have theories that fly off in different directions, people who are extremely skeptical that there's anything to talk about at all, people who are like so far down the rabbit hole that they think they understand the whole conspiracy, and people in the middle who are trying to be careful. So one of the things I like about it as somebody who's drawn to intellectual challenges is that it is a complicated information environment. And so it requires you to think carefully and put things in different kinds of buckets, like this I'm absolutely sure about, this I'm highly skeptical of, this might be true, maybe, and then like you rate that on a degree of believability or verisimilitude or whatever, and you try to confirm things with multiple sources and move toward putting more things in the bucket of I absolutely know that this is true. So my kind of motto touchstone for this is what must we believe, and the thinking there is that this UFOs, the idea of UFOs challenges our worldview so intensely that you have to kind of like grasp for certainty where you can get it. I read this great book called The Scout Mindset by Julia Galef about how to think critically. And one of the things she says is that when we're confronted with information we don't want to accept, we ask, how can I avoid believing this? And when we're confronted with information that confirms our existing biases, we ask, how can I possibly believe this? How can I avoid believing anything except this thing, which makes me feel good because I already sort of believed it. And so UFOs really challenge that because there are things here that we just really don't want to believe are true.
And maybe now's a good place to talk about what really the time for me jumping off, I think for a lot of people in the United States, was the Tic Tac UFO. Lieutenant Commander Daniel Fravor.
David
Fravor. Yeah. I always get that name wrong every single time. And you talked with somebody on his team as well, right?
I talked with somebody in the like 3-boat fleet that they were on. They had like the Nimitz is an aircraft carrier, and then they had the
San
USS
Diego, right?
Princeton. I think it's off San Diego.
Yep.
It's like 2004. You've got an aircraft carrier, a destroyer, and a submarine. We have no information from the submarine, which I thought was interesting.
That is very interesting,
right?
Yes.
So the Nimitz is the place where the planes are taking off. Then the Princeton is the destroyer. They were kind of like protecting the Nimitz, and also they have the sensor apparatus, and then the submarine is doing God knows what under the ocean. So I talked to somebody on the Princeton who was a part of the sensor apparatus team, and he said that he's never talked to anybody on the submarines, and that like submariners are famously secretive, and we'll probably never get any information from them. But there is an underwater component to the Nimitz encounter, which suggests that somebody on the submarine probably knows something about what happened.
There has to be more information, but for a lot of people, that was the first time where they saw something that was captured in so many different ways, whether it was the heat signature, whether it was the auto lock-on from the planes, and just all these different technical aspects where a lot of people would say, this has to be something. And I think that might have been one of the gateways way back in 2004. And those people that were involved in that specific event, incident, or sighting, whatever you want to call it, they have had so many discussions publicly. So there's so much access to the broader public to have thought about that specific event. So maybe that was the one. For me, it certainly felt like I was a UFO believer in the sense that there is so much out there. We would be crazy to think that we are the only ones. Like, we are so special.
Sure.
But that was one where I could tangibly take information to my pod of friends, community, and be like, what do you guys think about this? Because these guys are the best that we have, right? If you know anybody in the Air Force, to become an Air Force pilot and be one of those guys up there as a trained observational observer, just looking at what's going on, and then you have all this, combined with all the information, oh my God, now I can start having conversations. Those conversations lead us to say, oh, that's Mugsy the Creator, he's nuts. All right, if you want to talk about conspiracy theories, sure, go talk to him. But I don't know, I have to give some credibility to these people in the community were supposed to put all our trust in, or at least examine it under some different light. So,
that was a flip switch for me too. And listening specifically to the long form discussion with David Fravor on Lex Friedman's podcast.
Yeah, Lex was great.
Shout out. That was for me when the switch flipped all the way. Weirdly, in 2017, they released some videos that were really compelling and should have flipped the switch for me, but didn't somehow. Like there's this famous article in the New York Times by Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper called Black Money and Auras at the Pentagon. I forget. You go look it up, and then you can check out more articles that they wrote about Ryan Graves and other sightings in 2019. And then in 2023, they debuted the whistleblower claims about reverse engineering programs that the U.S. has allegedly been maintaining for a long, long time. But for some reason that didn't flip the switch for me. I grew up watching X-Files and thought, oh, this was a fun thing to think about. But I still kept it in this bin of like, who knows,
well, society's
maybe.
still going on and nothing has changed in society.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're supposed to change the way that you interact with the world.
One of the most interesting parts about UFOs for me actually has been noticing how much we derive our sense of reality from the way other people are behaving. So there's this huge group of very, very interesting things about UFOs, like maybe they're visiting from far away, or maybe they imply things about consciousness, or maybe they imply things about the technological progress of secret parts of the U.S. government, or non-governmental entities. But then there's this other just like fascinating bucket of things that this phenomenon points up, which include like incuriosity. Like the what's really weird when you start going down the bunny hole is like we've been getting really interesting information about UFOs for like fully 80 years, and we just have not gotten to the bottom of it. And it's not like people are clamoring to get to the bottom of it.
And
so
and beyond
go
that
ahead.
too. Excuse me. I'm
No,
sorry.
you take it.
We can go as far back in history as we want, and we see cave paintings of these flying things.
Yeah.
So it's not, I mean, the 80 years, for sure, we have
Yeah.
in the last 80 years, but thousands, everyone
Right.
who's ever been around that we know about is recording. And whatever they can record, like stick, fish, sky, look at that.
Yeah, and there are like drawings from the Middle Ages, and there are reports from the 1800s. There are almost every major, all the major religions have stories about people from the sky. All the indigenous traditions have stories about this. So it looks like the breadcrumb trail goes way back, all the way to the beginning.
At some point, we have to start looking at ourselves and say, what is it about us?
Yeah, like what are we missing? What are we incapable of exploring? And that I think is so fascinating. Like when NASA released their study panel in 2023, I think, they explicitly carved out a paragraph to say, hey, by the way, while we were doing this, while we were just formally investigating how we would even start to think about investigating UAP, we got a lot of hate mail from the scientific community. Not like weird incels on Twitter, like
the actual
scientists.
people are saying, stop looking at this.
Yeah,
so
it's the
what
waste
is
of your
up
time.
with that? It's weird.
It is
Why
really
are you playing
weird.
defense on information?
Exactly.
If we're on this crazy rabbit hole where we're never going to find anything and we're just going to be wasting our energy for years, why don't you let us do it?
And what makes this especially strange is that we're really into chasing avenues that have so far been completely fruitless, like superstring theory or dark matter or dark energy. All three of those things might just be fully fake, but we have spent billions of dollars researching them, and we're going to continue to do that. And I think that's cool. I think we should do that for everything. But what's weird is that the UFOs again and again, decade after decade, show up and people say, yeah, but we're busy researching imaginary gas or whatever. Like, I don't understand it, but I think it is not too hard to come up with a theory. I think like the fundamental challenge of UFOs is basically this idea that you might be going up the intelligence scale and that we might be looking at something that's more advanced than us. It's like a really profoundly, deeply rooted idea in all of our human culture that we are at the top of the food chain and we've dominated Earth and we don't even love this about ourselves. Like a lot of us really are sad. There's the Agent Smith speech in The Matrix about how we're a virus, That's a widespread take. But even within that take is embedded this idea that we're the most powerful entities, at least in our corner of the universe. So do you want to talk a little bit about the getting from that assumption that you said, like, of course there's somebody somewhere, which is like widely held, to, of course it's believable that they might be here and we would not notice? Because I feel like that's the missing leg. And go ahead.
Absolutely. I think that is When you go back and you look at philosophy, Robert Edward Grant, are you familiar with Robert Edward Grant? He's a philo mathematician. So he's become.
What does that mean?
He's become brilliant in multiple avenues fields of mathematics, so like calculus and geometry.
Okay.
But he has this whole theory that applied mathematics is geometry. Applied geometry is you know what? I don't want to screw it up because I screw it up so much. But I think it will help us here.
So the general idea is that these fields all reflect each other in some fundamental way?
Exactly, and I think that'll be a perfect place for us to pick that up. Applied math is geometry, applied geometry is physics, applied physics is chemistry, applied chemistry is biology, applied biology is psychology, applied psychology is sociology, applied sociology is philosophy, and applied philosophy is math. Takes us all the way back around. But this idea that I think philosophically, the Oracle at Delphi said, who is the wisest man? The man that knows he knows nothing. Is because recognizing that you are not the highest on the food chain is going against your own survival instincts, because our brain has been wired and programmed to keep us alive. And sometimes that means blocking out all of the trauma that is happening to you in real time. So for a lot of people, climbing that ladder and saying there are UFOs here, they may be interacting with us, we don't know, means accepting that we are not the smartest and leaving that comfort zone of living inside the box. Now, where most people don't believe they live inside the matrix, it takes some sort of leap of faith to get you outside of it, some sort of traumatic event where you start to notice the trauma that's coming in and healing that. I don't know exactly how these things could be interacting, but I believe the way that I've been able to cultivate the most wisdom in my life is by assuming that I know nothing. So I am open to the idea that these things could be interacting with us in real time on a regular basis without our knowledge.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I like your use of the word trauma there, because something that happens when you pass the flip switch into thinking about UFOs really is that you go from feeling like it's a really fun idea to recognizing that it's pretty serious. And unfortunately, there's kind of some fear to that. Like, just in the last few days, I've had some like spooky dreams about this that are, I've had my first 3 spooky UFO dreams now after like 3 years of thinking about this. And it's part of, I think, the process of taking it seriously, that you recognize that there is like a genuine, not exactly threat, but like a challenge to, our supremacy, to our place in the universe. Luckily we're used to that because most of us like don't run the world, so we're already at the mercy of these larger forces around us.
99.999% of us.
So maybe that helps a little bit. But I also want to push on your point about knowing nothing, which I think is really important from a philosophical standpoint, to like stay skeptical, stay sort of neutral. But I'm starting to bump into a few people. Like I had a really cool conversation with an astrobiologist recently, and sometimes people in the scientific community do this, I would say maybe slightly too much. I think it is important to be careful, but if you let being careful prevent you from making any progress, then you're sort of blocking yourself intellectually just because. And I think there's a way in which that can kind of screen you from a psychological preference to avoid engaging with the actual possibility. So this person's line is basically, look, we haven't ruled in extraterrestrials, but we haven't ruled them out, and we have no proof that they are, but we don't have proof that they aren't either. So, he's not wrong about that, but if you just sort of leave it at that neutral space, you don't get to what comes next, which is we need to find out. We should get more information. And based on the information that we have reasons to suspect some kind of things about this. Like, for one thing, they're physical objects. This is like a way in that we didn't have as of even a few years ago. But in 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence presented a report to the United States Congress that said most of these things are physical objects. You can also find...
It's official now. Like, it's something that we can talk about because there has been some disclosure from the institutions that we would be looking to, from the positions of power inside the know of the information. So now We have to start interacting with
Another
this.
great place to start there is Barack Obama on, I think, James Corden saying, what is true is there are objects in the sky that we don't understand fully, basically. They have patterns that we can't easily explain. These are physical things. We're talking about physical things. So then follow on to that, some of these things look like they're technological. Some of these things look like they're behaving intentionally. And when you get that on paper from the contemporary military, you can compare it to what people were finding in the 40s and 50s when the first director of the CIA, this guy named Roscoe Hillenkotter, said these things are real and they're operating under intelligent control. And I don't know what they are. They're not the US and they're not Russia. So what
are we
they?
doing?
And that's the 1950s.
Let's get to the bottom of it. We need to.
It's really
Somebody
embarrassing
did.
that we didn't.
Somebody did.
So
Somebody
maybe,
did.
maybe.
Somebody had to.
And this is another extremely disappointing part of the whole rabbit hole, because the idea that some sort of secret organization, like within the intelligence community, or what some people call like a breakaway civilization of like basically creeps and weirdos who have this information and haven't been sharing it with the rest of us, like a criminal conspiracy, basically. Either you're talking about like military intelligence, or you're talking about a criminal conspiracy, or it's some combination of those two things. But the idea that they've been keeping fundamental scientific truths from the rest of us is really profoundly upsetting, because this is back to the superstring as a touchstone. We don't understand much about it, or maybe you understand more than I do, but we all have access to basically the edge of the field. And the extent to which we can't access that edge is just a function of our own limited understanding. Like somebody with a PhD can explain as much as we can possibly understand about the edge of science in that direction. But that doesn't exist in UFOs, except for the technologists who are researching this on their own, usually on their own dime. I'm going to talk to a couple guys tonight who are like electromechanical engineers that have been writing about warp propulsion and stuff like that. So there are people out here doing the work. And a really happy discovery for me is that there are now fully hundreds of scientists who are checking into this, think there's something to look at, and want more information. So the next step for them is they have to get public funding. They currently have zero public funding, and we have spent literal billions of dollars researching microparticles and dark matter, but we're not spending any public money except in the military on UAP, and we really need to start.
That is so true. I think one of the other access points I have for thinking about the possibility of getting to the bottom of this way back in the 1940s and 50s is economics. I have a degree in macroeconomics with a concentration in financial markets.
Whoa, cool.
I've worked inside of banks, and I call myself an economist for 20 years, 14 to 34, and then I retired. I'm 35 now.
Okay.
And started doing this.
You were an economist at 14?
Well, it's just the way that you think about the world,
Okay.
right? So I started trading stocks. I started with baseball cards when I was a kid, which is
Okay.
even crazier when you think about that. So I'm learning to
Nice.
establish value and the principles of markets, right?
Yeah.
And then I get into economics. I'm lucky enough to go to a school down the street at St. John's Prep, and they have a investment club that allows you to manage part of their endowment.
Wow,
so
cool.
we got into that, and that has just given me a profound understanding of markets and how they operate and the principles of economics. Now, part of that has to do with just understanding numbers as well. $1 trillion is the Pentagon's new budget this year. We can call it about $1 trillion for the last 20 years. Hypothetically, with dark money, do you know what the entire music industry is worth?
No,
valuation?
great question.
It's about $12 billion.
No.
If you were to add up the value of all the sports teams, all the sports leagues themselves, we're getting to $200 billion. So
Wow.
in 1 year's Pentagon budget, we could purchase all of the control that would be a music industry, which has power and influence over X amount of people, all of the sports industry. And then what would we do the next year? You know what I mean? Because we've got another $1 trillion to spend. So I just don't believe that there's not enough money out there. I think the money has been going to places. And then we hear about with the new Social Security. Part of the problem with the Social Security is the U.S. aid, whatever they're looking into. I don't get into the nitty gritty in the politics unless I'm going to cover it specifically for a story. But the Social Security Department operates out of a mountain bunker where everything is done by paper. So if you want to remove somebody from the Social Security registry, you have to get somebody to go into a literal mountain and destroy that file by hand.
Oh, man.
So I know that we're not exactly dumping money into efficiencies here. So I
Yeah.
do think that there are people somewhere that know.
Yeah.
Now, if they're not going to tell us,
That's the problem.
that's an issue. But we're brushing also right up against quantum mechanics and quantum physics.
Yeah, we could be looking at quantum engineering because some of these things do really weird stuff. Like
Well-
they move through the air and the water in a way that doesn't seem to affect the surrounding air and water.
Absolutely, but hypothetically, we can all individually work on that as well if we just think about it from the quantum state of the double slit experiment and Schrodinger's cat is one I love to think about because it also highlights the duality of this universe too. We think it's one thing or the other. It's not. It's superposition all the time. We get stuck in this duality. So if there are hypothetically entities interacting with humanity on a regular basis, the only thing that's preventing us from interacting with them personally is our own beliefs that they're not interacting with us.
Yeah, this definitely opens the door to the next interesting layer of the subject, which is that it's likely to be weirder than we think. So, like, layer one is maybe they're coming from far away. But
Yeah, maybe they're coming from another planet. That's like something that we can all
That's
understand.
graspable, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
because we've gone to Europe, and it's like, oh, this is just a far Europe on a spaceship.
Right, but if they understand more about the nature of reality, like they understand the physics behind the double slit experiment,
The laws of the system that we're trying to investigate scientifically, right?
Right, yeah. And again, this is an area that people have sort of bumped up against stigma because if you try to publish like psi research, stuff about telepathy or precognition, it's hard to get peer reviewed and it's hard to get published in major journals. But there are people out there. I would recommend Dean Radin as like a trailhead for people to check out. Check out his book, Real Magic, maybe as a place to start. But I don't know how to evaluate these claims, and I'm very, very interested in it. The short version of this, I think, is it's easy to imagine interstellar travel by aliens who are smarter than us, but I think it's probably wise to layer in the idea that we probably don't understand all of the nature of reality, and we certainly do not. And it's likely that a race that was more advanced than us, like a million years ahead or something, would understand more. So if there is something like a spirit plane or a psi field where telepathy and precognition and even reincarnation and stuff happen and are facilitated physically by the nature of reality, it's likely that a more advanced species will understand how to interact with those phenomena more than we do. And so as a result, finding out that aliens are here
We're in Pluto.
might also open the door to finding out that there's a real spirit world and we have only been experiencing one aspect of a much deeper, more beautiful reality. So that's very exciting.
Hypothetically overlapping, and that's
Yeah.
where mathematically I think we come back to the fractals, right? Like we could be existing in one universe that just like dogs see certain colors and cats see certain things. And hear
Yeah, I
different
think that's a
frequencies.
great analogy. And every animal has like a different sensor apparatus. Some of them see heat or they see ultraviolet waves. They can perceive sound physically. So it's quite likely that whatever beings that we encounter, if they're not from Earth, will have a whole different set of sensor apparatus. But before we go farther into that, because I think we should probably, or further, we should go deeper into that territory. But I had one question for you as an economist. I want to just like bounce off this idea about one version of the cover-up story and see just like how it passes the
just
smell
how
test
it-
or
yeah,
doesn't for you. Okay,
absolutely.
so some people think that there's a breakaway civilization, which is to say there's like a group of human beings who have developed extremely advanced technology. This is, for some people, this replaces the idea of extraterrestrial visitors. For other people, this is a compatible theory with the idea of aliens. So like Stephen Greer is famous in this space for saying aliens are real, but also there's a giant conspiracy that's not just the military conspiracy, but that is like a private super organization, like an Illuminati type thing, a Spectre from James Bond. And these people have like developed hypertech that they don't want to share. And so the part of the thinking of this theory is that the economic powers that be have developed equipment which could replace fossil fuels. And so as a result, they're hiding this technology because they want to preserve the economy as they currently control it. And I wanted to bounce that off you and see how you feel about it as somebody who thinks about the world in terms of money and business, because I find it on the one hand appealing, but on the other hand sort of counterintuitive. Like, it seems to me, at least my experience of life so far has been that when people invent something really cool, they tend to try to bring it to market. They find really cool ways to sell it, even if it starts out as a toy or like some entertainment device. That my whole experience of development of technology so far has been when people invent things, they try to sell them. So I wanted to bounce this off to you. How do you feel about those two versions of this idea?
So I think in order for things to change, things need to stay the same. And that costs a lot of money.
What does that mean?
So into that churn that we were talking about. Have you ever seen the movie by Michael Moore, Who Killed the Electric Car?
Oh,
It was
man,
one of
I
his
might have
first
like 20 years ago.
documentaries.
Yeah.
So that is one version of the electric car that was extremely popular. Almost everyone, there was 99% of the people that tried it wanted to buy it from
And this
GM.
is like 100 years ago,
this
right?
Is
Like
1989, 1988, 87.
1980. Okay, so not that long ago.
Yeah, no, but this was right after a lot of the oil increases in the late 70s, so that's recent in everyone's mind, into the oil embargoes, into the early 80s, inflation's rampant. This would be crazy to have an electric car. It would be so efficient. Everyone loved it. GM bought them all back and destroyed them because they have the power to do that.
I get where you're going.
Because things need to stay the same, because if you're in power,
Yeah.
you need to make it look like there's a whole lot of change going on in order to keep the power that you have. I think there's a lot more of that. And if you go look through history, I can show you several people who killed themselves with a shotgun to the head right after they found out how to run a vehicle on hydroelectric power, that have found different ways to utilize free energy. And then all of a sudden they go crazy and kill themselves.
Yeah, this is something that I've seen a lot, but I haven't compiled like a sufficient amount of information to flip my own switch in the same way that I have with UFOs.
On YouTube. I don't know if you've ever seen that show, the Y-Files. They're awesome. They tell you about what they can prove, and then they tell you about like what is absolutely we've found to be like superstition and story behind it. But there's a lot of what in the hell happened there, and I am not brave enough or smart enough. Let's be serious. I can't go figure out how to run my car on water. Or at least not at this stage yet. But I'm definitely not brave enough to go poking around. But when I start looking through history, I start seeing a lot of these stories. And I start seeing a lot of the same names. And I refer to economics and economists in a binary form. So you either understand economics or you don't. It's very simple. Money is fake. All of economics is magic. And if you don't understand that from Jump Street, then you're going to be in the rat race.
Interesting.
That's it. Because energy is what money is trying to capture, is your energy. And we've slowly devalued that because your eyes are on money. And you're not thinking about your energy that you're using every day and how you're utilizing that, whether that is where you want your energy to take you in the world, where you want to end up. So there could definitely be a break-off society.
Okay.
I don't necessarily believe that there is one, although I'd like to see the Grand Canyon. I'd like to wonder why there's off-limit spaces. I'd like to know what's under the Denver airport, which is, as I understand it, COG, continuation of government.
That's news to me.
So that's the plan, is if DC gets hit, there's a bunker, continuation of governance. So like if anything were to happen in DC,
interesting.
We're going to Denver. So what else
bunker.
you got under there? There's bunkers about 2 hours outside DC that are declassified. Like I don't know the particular. That's one of the things that I love about your podcast is you have such an ability to understand the vernacular of the science because you've clearly done the homework.
Thank you.
And that's somewhere where I may be able to do so in economics, but it's very clear I'm out of my depth. I wouldn't be able to have the discussions with the PhDs and the scientists that you are.
I'm not a scientist, but I do find it very interesting.
But you do a great job, and you clearly do your homework.
Oh, thank you.
But so from an economic standpoint, I think that's why it's just so clearly black and white for me. And whether I'm watching an economist on TV if you're going to be wrong about something, every prediction you make is going to be wrong for 25 years. You're not an economist, right?
Right. Well, you're a bad economist.
Yeah. So what are you if you're the same guy, Larry Summers, put on TV, and you're wrong about things? Wait, but you're right about things too. But you're right about things that aren't good for the American people. And when you're the Treasury Secretary, I could go on this tangent forever, but when you're the Treasury Secretary, what do you do in there? And now you're going to sit at Harvard for a whole bunch of years. You're not going to say anything. I don't know.
It's interesting. Go ahead. You have deeper opinions on this area.
Yeah,
than I do.
absolutely. Just because of the numbers behind it.
This do the numbers make you think that a free energy device is the kind of thing that like a conspiracy would want to suppress, or do you buy this idea that new technology wants to interact
it
with
would be
the
in
market?
everyone's best interest, monetarily, to suppress that. What would...
Don't you think we'd come up with new stuff to do with it, though? Like, if we had a whole bunch more energy, we could, like, desalinate the ocean and flood the Southwest with rich verdant fields.
I would love to go here with you, if you can.
Okay.
So time. What makes you think we haven't already had those things?
Because I look around and don't see them. I mean, we don't have electric cars. We've got, like, limited compute.
Have you ever gone back and looked at the World's Fairs?
I was just thinking the other day that I missed the World's Fair, and we should bring it back.
We should definitely bring it back. I don't know why it stopped either.
I don't know much about them.
Almost like there was an erasing of some technology.
Interesting.
For me, it's the pyramids in Egypt.
It's the pyramids, dog.
That's technology. Yeah, man. That's technology we don't understand.
Yeah, probably.
It is something
I'm
we don't
sure
get.
you've been tracking this thing about the
Underneath?
imagery underneath that looks like they might go way, way down. Fascinating stuff. I would love for that to be true because it's like an unavoidable smoking gun if that's real.
And I'm just completely guessing, right? I'm just shooting in the dark. I have no clue what that could actually be.
Sure.
But it brings me back to the point that I know nothing. And I've also gotten stuck on this idea of energy, frequency, and vibration. If you think about the world in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, you'll understand the secrets of the universe.
I am so curious about this, and I'm really looking in this next year to build more of a scientific understanding of what that means, because right now, my perception of it is very squishy. Like, I sort of buy that there's something to it. I've, like, messed around with chakras and, like, reached up to balls of lights above my head and kind of dipped a toe, and I believe that there's a reality to this spiritual aspect of existence, but I don't understand what people mean, like in a literal sense, when they talk about vibration, for example. Do you have more of an understanding of that, or you just kind of use it as a shorthand?
I definitely use it as a shorthand. I think I'm developing a vernacular, again, to be able to discuss these things, and I am listening or having discussions with as many people as I can. Robert Edward Grant and Matthias DeStefano and Aubrey Marcus have been instrumental in having conversations with people that would be mediums, more spiritual, also very religious people in all different aspects, as I try and understand the same things. When I think about energy, frequency, and vibration, I just think about it in my everyday life, the energy that I'm bringing. I know that there is an amount of homework that I have to do to be my best self. And when I started integrating gratitude in the morning, first thing when I woke up, changed my outlook and my life for the rest of the day completely.
What was interesting about that is I was just going to say there's this cool conceptual layer of interacting with it. So even if you're kind of like a low woo person who thinks like, this all sounds nuts to me, just on a metaphorical level, the energy, like the kind of vibe that you bring into a room is extremely relevant, but you can also key into these vibes by doing like explicit conceptual stuff, like focusing on things that you're grateful for.
Absolutely.
Or like in a conversation, one thing that I just started thinking about and is fun for you to try at home is if you're in a conversation, try like imagining a bubble around the person you're having a conversation, like creating a sphere that encompasses the 2 or 3 or how many people you're talking to, and like that will help you focus on that space and like create more of a direct interaction.
Absolutely. Your acting background, there were a couple of notes I had about some other things too. I want to dive into that later, but But yeah, acting, you must absolutely have to get into the energy and then trying to play a character and stuff.
And I've been thinking a little bit about this in the last couple years of creating a bubble like that for the group of people who are here live in this room, like the bubble of the symphony orchestra audience and the symphony and the people on stage, and trying to live in that space together. One of the really cool things about doing live theater is that everybody's experiencing the same set of phenomena. So if something breaks on stage, 3,000 people all have that experience simultaneously. And then if you ignore it, then you kind of break your contract with the people out there. So you have to like live in the same reality. And when you do that, it really starts to create something magical that you're all feeling together.
Creating this environment on the stage, right? So that in and of itself is thinking about energy as well, right? So thinking about energy, frequency, and vibration. So one step further, I thought, how can I go even further into now that I understand that I am a product of my environment, what's the best environment I can put myself in? So all last summer, I went out to Breakheart Reservation down in Saugus.
Nice.
And I recorded just my thoughts. 1 minute a day, I put it on Instagram. And that's what really got me to start understanding. I don't even know how to say understanding in my mind. I don't even know if I'm articulating it right. But
connecting with nature is very powerful. People have done that through the millennia as a way to get closer to truth.
Yes. So I had Ralph Waldo Emerson's book, his essays, in my bag. And when at the end of the summer, I picked it up and I read his thoughts on nature. And it was like mind-blowing. It was this guy who's thinking exactly the things that I was thinking about this environment, how it can be so nourishing to everything that you're trying to bring out, whatever that is. And
something that happens to me when I experience nature is that every other part of life comes flooding through your thought structure. Like if you sit and look at a stream, you will notice that you think about everything. Like water is like love, water is like family, water is like work, water is like money, water is like everything else in the universe.
Yes.
And that can be a really beautiful time. It's also a nice place to bring a journal.
Yes,
I'd recommend,
absolutely.
because you start to so go ahead. You picked up a thought there.
Just the coherence of nature. Everything in nature is perfectly balanced. If it's going to die, it's there for a reason, because something else is going to use that to grow and come back. So I think that the thoughts that I had when I was out there in nature were completely unique, and it brought a coherence to my energy.
Kind of like aligned you with the nature of reality.
And I was able to capture that. And I try and now bring that with me, whatever that is.
Cool.
And I have the ability to like, oh, wait a minute, just take a beat and get myself back to that energy. And that was something I guess I had always thought to try and do, but I was never able to perfectly articulate. But in that environment, the nature I became a product of that, and I was paying attention enough to be like, oh, I need more grounding. I haven't been outside all day.
Attention is super key, and maybe this is useful for people who are listening, or one person who's listening, that in nature, it's really easy to notice all the things around you because we're sort of not of that world most of the time, but we forget to do that when we're in like the Village Tavern like we are now. So something that's really great if you're feeling stressed out or anxious or angry or whatever is to just sort of switch over your conceptual apparatus temporarily from focusing on your thoughts to just focusing on your sensations. So just register what you're looking at, what you're feeling, like notice the weight of your body on the ground, notice any sensations on your skin,
I'm doing it right now.
temperature in the air. It really like takes you to a different place, and it's a good off-ramp from whatever emotion has just come up. It's not suppressing the emotion, it's just redirecting your attention, and then that can kind of reset you for whatever comes next.
That is so awesome. Yeah, so that is the way that I've conceptually been trying to think about the world. And now, I guess the best way to articulate the way that I kind of think about the thought process is kind of like game theory. If this, then what? So if there's $1 trillion budget, then what are they spending it on?
They don't even know, apparently.
I know. And I can see X, Y, and Z, and then I can take a look at the world. And I can see that no money has been spent here. So what happened to it? So I do the same thing with UFOs.
Yeah, I wanted to mention this idea from epistemology called mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive dichotomies.
Okay.
And this is a way, I think, to get beyond that problem we were mentioning earlier of feeling like, I just don't know anything, man, and like staying neutral. You can start to say, you can bucket things into basically binary systems. So like either there is a global conspiracy or there is not. If there is not, we might expect to see XYZ. If there is, we might expect to see XYZ. Either there are extraterrestrial visitors around Earth or there are not. Either UFOs are technological or none of them are. What's a local example? Like either we are in Salem, Massachusetts right now, or we are not. You can bucket the world into these
Observable.
And factually true systems, such that one of the things is factually true for sure. So. When you design a mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive dichotomy, you're trying to encompass all of the possibilities and give yourself something to work with, sort of as like a block, like a foundational unit of thought, so that you can move then to your next set of ideas. And I think that's preferable to just imagining. Well, I guess what happens is people take these MECDs and they just decide that they don't have the answers to any of them. But you can logic is a real thing, like it's a real science. I'm not good at it, but people do it. Like
We all try.
you can take. Are you familiar with the simulation hypothesis?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like of course you would be. So I think that's like a masterwork of logic, and it's extremely interesting. And people maybe don't know that the larger work of logic there is not the claim that we are living in a simulation. It's a set of ideas that make it ultimately feel intuitive that we probably are living in a simulation, which is not exactly the same thing. But basically, he gives you the choice by thinking carefully that there are some things that either won't happen or we will create lots of simulations. Like either we will stop developing increasingly realistic game worlds, or we will never want to build game worlds that have intelligent operatives in them, or we will eventually do that, and therefore we will build more of those than the base reality. And therefore, if you think that it's likely that we're going to keep creating more realistic game worlds, then it's ultimately believable that this thing we live in is one. So maybe that gets us closer to your subject of consciousness. Would you like to explore that area? Because it's a lot of the weird squishy consciousness stuff makes more sense in the context of
hypothetical consciousness, right? Just this
a simulation. Like if we're living in a reality that has a superstructure that we don't fully understand, then that would explain why that could potentially explain why we have these like weird sort of magical experiences that don't make sense as far as we comprehend them with the physics we've developed thus far.
Is it easier to operate believing that it is?
That believing that we are in a
simulation?
I don't know. I think that's a good question. I think some people probably find it like really dissociating, and like they would drift away from the world like nothing matters. A similar thing happens around free will. Like if you get really convinced of this idea that you don't have free will and you really focus on it, you can behave sort of strangely. Like you might make bad health decisions, for example. Like if you take away this concept of responsibility, which I think is interesting because that means the concept of responsibility, even if it is an illusion, is useful. Because if you believe that you are responsible and can like have impact on the world and on your own life as a proactive agent, like you were talking about, designing your environment to make better decisions and to be a healthier person, you have to believe that you have agency in order to do that. And if you don't believe that you can change anything, then why would you try?
So that, again, the choice kind of brings us the free will aspect. Mm-hmm. Does the free will have to be happening now? Could we have made the choices and made the decisions, and then we are brought into this three-dimensional plane to experience and have the viewpoint of all the decisions that we have already made before we even got here.
Yeah, I do think that kind of just moves the problem. Like a lot of people do think
Hide the bacon.
hide the ball, kind of, yeah. Because then, well, did that agent have free will when it made the decision to come here? Like a lot of people believe, just to sketch this out more thoroughly, that we have free will in like a spiritual sense, and we like choose to come to the world to live this path. I don't know if I think that's true. I have actually no real opinion on it. I'm fascinated that people have this idea, but I don't think it solves the free will problem, because if you are a spirit somewhere making a decision, then you are also a product of your environment, even if it's a spiritual environment, right?
How do we get the information? How does the information come through? There must be some communication between the two.
It feels like also, and this is crazy, but it feels like this has something to do with the nature of time. Like the answer to this question probably lives out there somewhere in this bigger picture of whether linear time is real or not. But it's hard to imagine a free will type thing existing in a block universe where there is no linear decision. Because if you don't have decisions to make, if you don't have like events to go through, then what deciding do you have to do? Like,
how is it all operating?
What freedom do you have to bring to bear?
The only thing that I think about is, I think that my beliefs change all the time, and I try and pick up whatever one's working the best for me in the situation that I'm in, because there are limits to the decision tree that is in front of me based on however we got there. But
I think about it in terms of operationality also, like utility, basically. Is it useful to believe that you have free will? It is useful, even if you don't. And this is, to the extent I will ever have a deep thought in my life, this is like probably the single deepest that I've accomplished so far. It's that this recognition, this beautiful paradox of recognizing that because you are a product of your environment, you are just, you're like the crashing wave in the ocean that is coming from the ocean inevitably and crashing on the shore. You fundamentally do not have in this moment a freedom that is worth calling that, but it is better for your life if you believe and act as if you do, because you will do better things. And that is like a weird paradox. And
I concur.
I don't endorse living a lie, but at the same time, I do think that utility is a good way to think about life. And it creates complicated language, like how you even talk about existence if you don't embrace this idea of agency and responsibility. It becomes really difficult. So it's a useful kind of shorthand for living life, and it's a good way to think about creating better outcomes in the world.
Absolutely, and I think I tie that right into Jesus Christ. Where was I with the
tie it into Jesus.
With the free will. Oh my God! I'm so enamored with you. It's such a beautiful conversation.
It's very heady stuff. It's easy to get lost.
With the free will choice and the information, no matter what we're in, if I'm accepting that there is information coming to me in some way, shape, or form, whether it's from me in a previous universe, whether it's from an alien, or whether it's just information that exists in this quantum universe, how would it be coming through to me? So I think about my emotions as the information. So I want to make the decision that's going to make me feel the best. Now, there are obvious fallacies or traps to that. Like, I want to drink. I like drinking. I'm going to continue to drink because drinking makes me feel good. Well, all of a sudden you're screwed, right? So there has to be some boundary.
So that brings time back into it again, because you're going to feel good for 45 minutes, guaranteed. But will you feel good 3 hours from now? No.
So time, as I think about E = MC squares, Einstein's theory of general relativity, and the practical experiments, the experimentations that we did to prove that, when we took clocks and we had really fast planes fly them on the edges of our atmosphere
to see if there was like a difference. Yeah.
And there was.
Yeah.
So therefore time, but when you come back down to Earth, you have two clocks that are off.
Yeah.
So where's time?
Which clock is right?
So now is the only
strange.
time. That's the whole thing Einstein is trying to imprint on us, which now is the only time that exists. So now future and past are a fallacy.
And it could be, again, to bring it back to the aliens, that if we're talking to beings from a million years in the future, they might be more comfortable with that concept. They might be able to, like, what if there was an animal that instead of seeing ultraviolet light could see like the next 5 minutes and the previous 5 minutes at the same time? You know, like
Crazy.
maybe the future is already real, and living through it as we do is just like a product of our biology. And it's been like adaptive for some reason, like it's an evolutionary advantage for some reason we don't understand, to perceive time this way. And maybe that relates to this idea of the free will being useful, right? Like the idea of freedom having utility in life. Maybe there's like an evolutionary advantage to perceiving time as if it were linear, even if it's not.
Yes. So that hypothetically, though, if we're living in just that now, the information that's coming in now is relevant to us now. So you're pulling from your past and your future, two places that don't exist, to get to this moment now. We're having this discussion. What's going to be relevant? Oh, economics is going to be relevant. It's not like I have a Rolodex of all my economic information that I could just tap into, but it comes up and you ask a question, and all of a sudden I'm back in the middle of the beginning of economics, and I remember the first three things that they said to us, which is this all relies on perfect information. Oh, all of economics relies on perfect information?
No, that's too bad, because
I
there's
wish
no
I
such thing.
remembered that, yeah.
Logic is the same way. Like there is no perfect definition in logic. The very first day of the only logic course I took, the guy was like, remember that in the real world, there's no such thing as a perfect definition of anything, because
Exactly.
everything is defined by other
Evolving.
words, which are also squishy. So it only works in these like proscribed arenas where you say blue is blue and that's all, and circle is circle and that's all. So if a blue thing is a circle, then yada yada yada. But like when you get out to the broader world of words and law and politics, like everything is squishy, and it becomes
Everything's
like
gray.
power and social
There's a lot
dynamics
more going on.
Yeah, it's
And
way
laws-
it's too complicated to be technically logical.
Yeah.
I think there's actually some principle by a genius whose name I've conveniently forgotten, about how like no logical system can prove its own accuracy or relevance, but it's beyond my ken a little bit. I wanted to press a little bit on this idea of the difference between feeling sort of metaphorically that all this spiritual stuff is true, like, oh, your energy is just like the attitude you bring to the world, or like the vibe you bring into a room,
Versus the tangible.
versus like an idea that there is actually like a subtle body and like a spiritual reality that we don't currently know very much about, but that like really truly physically exists, and we can learn more about how to access it. I guess I could ask, which of those visions of the world do you lean toward, and what do they imply about how to move forward?
So I guess just right now, based on the information I've looked at recently, I do believe that there's this, like, you hear people, or I don't know if you've heard this, 3D versus 5D. There's two Earths going on. So the one thing about Einstein's theory of general relativity is it explains infinite expansion, which is always followed by division,
Okay.
which he doesn't explain at all.
Huh.
So there must be some sort of division that's going on.
Like, as in the universe would expand so much that it would rip
I have
into
no
two, like a
idea.
cell
I
divides
have
or something?
no clue
Yeah, me
what
either.
that
Well,
could mean or
this is
look
new to
like.
me.
But there's also increased, the poles are shifting, right?
Okay,
There's polarity
yeah.
on Earth. There's
This
duality
happens, like,
to this
every
3D.
Couple thousand years or something.
Yeah, hypothetically, that's
or
what we
million
know.
years. I don't remember.
know,
I don't remember
because-
the time scale, but it's a real thing
but-
we've measured.
Yeah, and scientists believe it, but nobody knows it for sure because there was nobody there to tell us about the last time that it
Yeah,
happened.
I'm sure they look for weird effects in rocks and fossils.
So if we think about our own limited understanding as in a vibrational state, like the lowest vibration, the worst feeling you could have, what is that? I think about it for me, when was I in fucking hell? And a lot of the jobs that I worked, they did their best to put me in hell. To put me on this schedule where there was no possible way that I was going to be able to complete all the work that they wanted and get home and take care of myself as a human being and feed myself and have enough money to go out and do like normal things, like begin to create a family. So I thought about those low vibrational states, and a lot of my friends still exist in those places doing those jobs.
Yeah.
And it is kind of like Monopoly, like the rat race that they talk about. So I exist in my own universe, quit that job, Made $12,000 last year. I am the happiest human being on planet Earth.
Aw.
I spend all my time in the woods. I focused only my energy on expanding the consciousness, whatever I can do for that. And I live in this same world, same 3D world, where I could interact in those same places, but I'm also kind of in this different place where I'm in my dreams. I'm not chasing my dreams. I'm living inside of them right now. So what does that mean?
It's fascinating.
Could these two things be overlapped right in real time as we're talking about it? Misery loves company,
Yeah, that's true.
but happiness is magnetic.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's a
inspiring
polarity
and
again,
warming.
right?
Interesting.
So you do get to choose, right? We're back to choice, free will. So what is it?
Oh man. All right. I want to take this to 3 different places. One is just to say that the vibe stuff, like as in the physicalism idea, is definitely true, no matter what. Like how you present in the world, what kind of attitude you bring, the facial expressions you make to people you're speaking with, like
Yes.
the health decisions you make about your life. All of that stuff is like 100% real and going to make your life better if you make healthier decisions and treat people better and just like have a generally better attitude. So that's true for sure. Next question, is the spiritual version of that true? Like, is there a real way in which you can like expand your aura and like open your chakras and connect to layers of reality that we mostly don't engage with? I would say maybe. This might be true. I think there's like a fair amount of evidence to suggest that there's at least territory here that we don't fully understand yet. And by the way, when scientists say, what are you talking about? There's no evidence for that. They will then in the next breath say, by the way, the universe is 94% dark matter and energy.
We don't know what that
so
is.
it's 94% made up of stuff you don't understand and you're not sure it exists, but you can guarantee there's no spirit world. Back off. Maybe. So maybe there's a spirit world. And moving into that maybe, I want to recommend 2 sort of book sources for people. One is a trilogy by this guy Robert Monroe, who created like is that
the Monroe Institute?
Yeah, the Monroe Institute. I guess I don't want to explain it, but it has something to do with like his basic idea there was whether we could like physically manipulate the energy of the brain and entrain the frequencies of the energy of the different halves of your brain to match up, such that you would enable like better psi performance, like out of body or precognition or yada yada yada.
All the things you would see in Hollywood, right? All the things that the Hollywood movies would be about. Is the belief that this guy Monroe, who's there's a ton of funding. The Monroe Institute is super. They're taking students now. I know I listened to a couple of podcasts for people that have been through the Monroe experience.
Oh, fun! And they have an app too that you can. They're just like a bunch of interesting meditations and stuff. I use this thing,
but this is public sphere. This is not some sort of like off taboo topic.
It's not deep secret, but it does cross over with. Well, it crosses over with like CIA stuff. Like there are some like remote viewers who worked for the U.S. military who
Bertie Jaworski side of things
crossed over, right? Yeah, and this guy Joe McMoneagle crossed over with Monroe, and he was like doing remote viewing for the military and getting tired, and so they hooked him up with Monroe, and Monroe like helped refresh his brain and make it easier for him to have out of body experiences and stuff like that. But anyway, that's all to the side of what I was going to recommend as a piece of content, which is that Monroe wrote a trilogy of books called Far Journeys, I think, or I think the middle one might be called Far Journeys, and that is the one that I recommend if you were just to read one. But there are 3. One is like about learning that he can do out of body stuff, and then the second one is about like where he went on his out of body experiences, and the third one is like taking that all the way to the edge of time and space, and you know what the future looks like, and Earth in hundreds or thousands of years. That's very interesting too. But for me, the juiciest one was the second one, and that crosses over with this other recommendation I'm going to make, which I believe is called Dreaming Yourself Awake, and that is a book about like Buddhist meditation. And the really interesting idea that I got from that was that Buddhists who practiced lucid dreaming did that with the intention of preparing for spiritual journeys beyond the living world. So their conception of like an afterlife or a spirit realm was that you might wake up there and be very confused. And you hear this if you read, like, I've gone down the psychic bunny hole and read a whole bunch of books about mediumship and psychic energy. And something that comes up a lot is like, once you get good at interacting with spirits, psychics will say, you sometimes bump into one that doesn't know that it's deceased, and like it's very confused. Like the story that stuck in my head for some reason was, I want to say it was Lisa Campion. She's a good writer about this stuff, and she said like she was spending the night at a hotel for a conference, and there was like a young girl spirit in her room, and the spirit like didn't know that it had died, and was like had died decades ago, and so it was lost and confused, and she helped it like transcend to whatever the next level was and release itself, and that cleared up the energy in her hotel room. So like who knows, who knows, but
so interesting.
but
There's
holding
so many
the
stories,
possibility
though.
that this is all potentially real has opened for me this idea that there might be a spirit world that's a lot more open and less rulesy than the sort of like classical religions want to tell you. And that doesn't mean that there's no such thing as classical religion heaven, or maybe even hell, but it does imply that we create those spaces or enter into them by our own energetic decisions. So you were talking about this like low vibration versus high vibration state, and this is the worldview that has evolved for me from interacting with works like this. And I know I sound fully loopy right now. I know, but this is
Not at all.
This is all like perspective. Like maybe this is possible. And if it is real, then I want to understand it and I want to get good at it, because someday I will die and I would like to be able to look around and go, okay,
I know
I'm
where
ready
I'm at.
for
Yeah.
what's next. And I think part of the thing that will help with that, with like being good at dying or being in some other spiritual state, is an awareness of this concept of vibrational energy. And so if you're living your life negatively and heavily and darkly all the time, that's going to set you up for being in that condition when you enter a spirit realm. And if the spirit realm is like water, say, and like your negative vibration is heavy, then you might sink to the bottom of it and you might end up in some places where you wouldn't want to go. But if you're practicing enlightening your energy and like moving up the sort of vibrational scale, whatever the hell that means, then in a spirit ocean you might rise. So this is a very fun idea. I have no idea if it's real, but like the famous philosopher said about God, it's worth believing just in case. And it also is more fun, I think, and in some ways scarier than the vision of the world where somebody meets you when you die with a clipboard and says you were good or you were bad, and then dictates what happens next. I think it's probably more personal, or it could be, at least based on these worldviews, more of a personal decision where you go.
Yeah, so I think our understanding of it, maybe just for the average human, it's easy to think about someone with a clipboard, but like even the Egyptians, the heart and the feather on the scale, you want to get that could hypothetically be, you want your own vibrational state, your heart to feel as light as a feather. You want to be comfortable with everything you've done on Earth. And when you can reach
or just
that,
like who you are right now, you don't necessarily have to judge yourself for everything that came before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A judgment, I think about as opposites with love. So fear and judgment are closely aligned as like the smallest percentage of love, and at the opposite end of that spectrum. If there's ever been something you're afraid of, if you try the experience and come at it from a place of love, I think that all of a sudden you learn a lot more from it.
And I would put anger in that heavier pile.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of spirit world and interactions, I do think that, especially here in Salem, Massachusetts, there's a lot of people that have come that believe that they have a tangible way that they can manipulate things, whether that's through chemistry, whether that's through things that we would call fantastical, but is just as measurable scientifically.
Maybe. It's
to put
been
people
really
in certain
hard.
states.
The science on this is like extremely difficult, and people have tried to do psi research, and it ends up being like really, really narrow margins.
I think the casual observer manifestation is going to be like, people say that they can manifest things, manifest experiences. I think that's going to be the average person's interaction with this hypothetical spirit world, where if you learn to interact with and become good at it, maybe you can start to manifest things.
Maybe. I want that to be true. It's certainly you can make your life better. Like sorry, go ahead. You had more to
Oh, no.
say.
I was just going to say, and then accessing, like if you want to access that specific world from this place, I think there's a couple ways to do it. And the Buddhist monks in Nepal are certainly one of them. There is a mental focus and different states that you can put your own body in by understanding these aspects of our own brain that I don't fully understand, but luckily there's a shortcut for other people. DMT and mushrooms is the other end of this scale where I think hypothetically we may be interacting with something similar. I, just to be fully transparent, have not interacted with mushrooms or DMT or any of the hallucinogenics to this stage. But I am super curious from everything that I hear from people all over, even intellectuals who have decided to try and better understand their own consciousness by putting it into an altered state of reality and then trying to better understand themselves when they come out of that altered state. I don't know for sure because I haven't gone down either path, but I do think in terms of interaction in the third dimension, that's what both are trying to do. The Eastern way would be the philosophy of Buddhism, Hindu mentality, which is worldwide. I shouldn't just say Eastern, but just more classically thought of as from China and India and Asia and the East, versus the way that we might interact with it on the other side of the world, which maybe more casually, even if you think about South America and the tea that everyone drinks that brings out DMT, hallucinations.
I was going to look up a book because I want to recommend...
the ayahuasca.
Oh, right. I've never done that either.
No, but that's also... I think it's becoming more poppy socially to go down there and have an ayahuasca experience. And I don't know that that's necessarily like vacation type spirituality is the same thing that you're going to be getting. But regardless, I do think that there's an aspect, especially because of those rainforests and those jungles. The process that they go through to make ayahuasca, there's, untold numbers of compounds that you would have to go through billions of combinations. And for you to find this one, where if you do a little thing this way and you do a little thing that way, you're not going to get it. You eat it fine. You make it in tea, it's not going to do anything. But if you dry out the tea leaves and you smash them up this way and you dance around them 3 times, all of a sudden you're going to talk to Jesus Christ, our Savior.
This is going somewhere interesting for me, but I want to quickly side note. I like this book, Eastern Body. It's called Eastern Body, Western Mind. It's a sort of a melding of like psychology and chakra ideas. So it's a good way to like...
I pick up as much of the books that I can just to poke around and figure it out.
I recommend it. I found it really fun because it's a good combination of these two idea sets, like energetic universe and like Western psychology. So you can apply the kind of like tool set that's a little more familiar to these more airy-fairy ideas. There's nothing in it about like out of body or spirit experience. It's just specifically about like chakras and psychology. But I wanted to take this to a fun place for me, which is that if this stuff is real, we will find out. We will learn more about it. And so right now, whether or not it's real, the vibration stuff makes sense to think about because in a literal physical way, it makes your world better. But also, if it is true, like capital T true, that there is a spirit realm that in which our consciousness lives that's like bigger than this physical reality we're experiencing, then moving toward a higher vibration is going to be good for that as well. And if that is capital T true, we will learn more about it eventually because our learning apparatus is pretty good. Even though it's taken us 80 years to pay attention to UFOs, we are actually gradually doing it. And we're gradually getting better at investigating size stuff too. So if it's real, we will figure that out. And to your point about DMT, there's been a really interesting bit of research in the last few years of people elongating the DMT state. I gather that it's quite short, but there's a team that's like dragging it out to 45 minutes.
Is it MAPS that's doing it?
I don't know, but maybe we're talking about the same
DMT realm.
Okay,
they're trying to map the actual realm,
and
because when you are on, as I understand it, when you're on this, you're only in that realm for a short amount of time, and on an IV intravenous drip, you can extend that, and with doctor supervision, you can stay in that universe.
This kind of sounds like the Matrix again, right? Like you're plugging into something and you're like accessing another layer of reality. Right back.
It feels like every conversation about UFOs, I find myself on walking the path is not the same as knowing the path. And every time I'm learning something or thinking about it in a different aspect that I never considered before.
Well, one of the really cool things about this study that I'm sure you've bumped into, but in case anybody listening is curious, they're starting to see one of the more interesting findings they've had is that people report being encounters, like they're talking to some kind of intelligence, and these reports are like strikingly similar across different people. So maybe there's some like phenomenon that makes your eyes dilate and you think you're seeing a head shape or whatever, or something happens in your brain that makes you think you're in a conversation. That's totally possible. But it's also possible that people are connecting with higher energy state consciousnesses of some kind, which would be fascinating. And I love this idea that they're like here around us and we're just like not perceiving them most of the time. That's totally possible. But the big picture there is what gets me excited when I think about this stuff and science is that we can learn more about it. And so like my favorite movie is Ghostbusters, and I think it's because it's a smash up of science and spirituality. And I think these worlds sometimes like don't like each other. Like not only does science not want to research spirituality, but the spiritual world kind of wants to keep science at a distance too. It's
The magic.
yeah, right. Like magic is just like something we haven't explained yet, right? And then as soon as we explain it, it's not magic anymore. Just like something is AI until we can describe how it works, and then it's just a computer.
That is so funny. That's exactly where I wanted to go next.
Yeah, great.
It was AI. I just had this kind of weird idea at Breakheart Reservation this summer. So everyone's afraid of AI because they're afraid AI is going to wake up. Now AI is going to do the jobs that humans are doing today. So we are the AI of the present. So if that's true,
Okay.
and we're afraid of the AI waking up in the future, what are we not waking up to today?
What do you mean when you say we're the AI of the present? Just like we were invented by previous generations to do the
What
tasks
I mean is
more efficiently?
literally the task that we're doing. We're creating robots to do. When we think about those robots as artificial intelligence, we created them to do the jobs that we're physically doing now.
Yeah.
So the A equals B if B equals, or A equals C if A equals B and B equals C.
I'm sorry, I'm still lost. What's your question? What are you trying to figure out?
So the whole artificial intelligence, what could we not be waking up to today? Like if we're so afraid of, what are we afraid of artificial intelligence waking up to in the future? Disobeying? Disobeying what? It's programming? What are we programmed to do? What are we afraid of ourselves unprogramming ourselves to do? Is it part of the psi stuff?
Okay.
Is it trying to bend spoons? Is it stuff straight out of the Matrix?
That's
Or
interesting. Or is it like a power thing, like people fear the revolution, or like
is it more
the populist pitchforks?
is it more mental than that? You just want to keep people in this grind,
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. I'm
almost like an engine, almost like it's
Maybe.
so weird. I see a lot of
That's
engineering correlation here.
I
I
find
think about
this-
us as the computer, as the human receiver, the brain, thoughts electric, heart magnetic. I think about us as an engineering vehicle.
Matrix again as the like battery cells. I'm pretty skeptical about the idea that we're somehow being manipulated psycho-emotionally to just like behave. I don't think it's fully crazy because there are ways in which we intentionally sort of pacify society, but there are aspects of that are healthy. Like I'm just thinking about like airport music. Like there's a reason they're not playing heavy metal at the airport.
Absolutely.
They're like keeping us kind of chill. It's a stressful place. Things have to work.
But if we go one step further to that, the hertz with which our music is played, the decibel, why is that not the love frequency? Why is it this odd one that we chose in the 40s or 50s when we started broadcasting radio?
Okay.
Because I agree with you.
You
The
think we could
environment.
like move it over to a frequency that would be healthier for us and
1,000%.
better? Interesting.
Absolutely. There's a million experiments out there. You can take a look.
Oh, cool.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this gets kind of closer to that vibrational thing and answering
Yeah.
it from a scientific perspective because like frequency relates to vibration.
Exactly. Tuning. So I don't know where thoughts come from. I do like this Platonic idea of all the thoughts are out there, and if we tune ourselves to them, then we can receive the information.
It's funny, I've like just sort of patriotically obsessed with this idea that we generate them, but it is kind of egocentric to imagine that, and it doesn't comport with the view of free will that we're just like a crashing wave.
I just try and source them, and I have trouble sourcing the thoughts. Sometimes I'll pick up on something and I'll realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm remembering a joke from a comedy set that I saw 10 years ago, and that's like the joke that I'm thinking about. But other things like E equals MC squared in time, I didn't exactly study Einstein a lot. I didn't read a ton of his books, but I thought about that equation for countless amounts of hours, just fascinated with, am I wasting time? What is the most valuable thing that I could be doing, given the choices that I have in front of me, understanding that I'm a moron, there's probably more available to me that I just can't see right now. So I guess I used it as a coping mechanism to go about making decisions in my life. But
Use what as a coping mechanism?
this idea that we are receiving information from outside places.
I see.
Because I thought I was in such this limited space, so I just thought about stuff, and maybe it's dumb ideas. I guess that's why I'm here on this podcast having a conversation with you, this unwrapping this idea of time as I went, because you have this idea or this thought and you can't trace it. I don't know where it came from. So then you start looking into it. And then I start looking into Einstein. Then I start looking into anyone who's had a conversation on time, interesting, and what resonates with me. Well, what does resonate mean? Like, why individually am I picking it up? So then it all kind of, as I'm interacting, I'm starting to think about myself as this receiver. I've clued into something here, time. And that's what I'm trying to receive. And as I'm interacting with the world, thinking about energy, frequency, and vibration and picking things up, I'm resonating with the things that I'm thinking about. I'm placing my energy on that time. So I'm picking up, hypothetically. And again, maybe I'm using this as a coping mechanism because I don't want to go pick up a fucking book and do the homework myself or find someone to explain it to me. But maybe it's just a different way of interacting.
That's interesting.
Similarly, as we were talking about, you can be a Buddhist monk or you can take some drugs. Maybe there's other ways to get information out. So I don't know. I just think I use that.
If telepathy is real, and if there are other beings out there, well, if telepathy is real, we could be sharing thoughts without even noticing it. It seems like it might potentially be real. We don't know. And various people might be better at receiving or projecting. And if there are beings that we can't see, like living in this DMT realm, then they could be interacting with us conceptually, right? But then there's also this like physical layer of our experiences. So like the comedy show that you went to 10 years ago created this little nodule of conceptual structures in your brain, which will rhyme with something that you heard. So if you hear the words that key that memory, then like you'll think of the joke.
All of a sudden,
and that's real too. So that's like a source of thoughts is all of our experience, right?
Yeah.
Leading up to the moment. And then the world around us interacts and like triggers this matrix, this network of our memories,
neurons
basically
firing in our brain
to generate a thought, an idea. And you can like broaden your scope of engaging with thoughts and ideas by reading and listening to podcasts and watching the news or contemplating can expand to some extent. That's one of the reasons I recommend journals, is that I think contemplation kind of it ends up being less insightful than you would think conceptually. Like contemplation can be really insightful on a sort of deeper level, like on a spiritual I see, I feel the nature of reality level. But if you want to like get to layers of thought that you haven't accessed, writing it down is really helpful, even if you're sitting by a stream, or maybe especially if you're sitting by a stream. So then all of these thoughts that we create from our memories and our previous experiences and our research, our education, and our own thought practice will then trigger by whatever they're interacting with in the present moment, to the extent that present is a real thing, who freaking knows, and that will like generate this feeling of a thought. And then there's the possibility of like a spiritual component to that, where thoughts are coming in, and this does show up in UFO research. A lot of people have had what they call downloads, where they like didn't know anything about rocket science, and suddenly like a whole bunch of engineering physics
a lot of the
just
term
shows
I
up
hear
in
that
their
all
head.
the time. Elon says it.
I've never heard Elon say that.
He said it a couple times. He doesn't say it on a
Interesting.
lot of podcasts, but the way that he received, maybe he's described it. He's
doesn't want to
described
admit
it.
he
He
got
hasn't
his ideas
used
from somewhere else.
that word. Maybe I'm wrong. But
Interesting.
Yeah,
All
I've
right.
listened to a ton of his stuff.
Let's steer right away from him before I say something stupid. You want to talk about AI? I find it super duper interesting. I'm very curious about like what we're afraid of, and I like aliens. I think or UFOs or whatever they are. The ultimate vision of reality, I think, is likely to be weirder than we can possibly currently imagine.
Survival, keeping our eyes closed. Survival instincts trying to keep us alive.
Yeah, maybe. And also, we're just at the limits of our expectation. You remember the movie Her is just like a fantastic touchstone emotionally, psychologically, and intellectually for the subject of AI. But you remember the scene where she like introduces him to her like meta AI friend?
I did not see it.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
But I'm sure
okay. I'm sorry.
I know that
I don't want to spoil it.
No, spoil it. It's like 10 years old.
Fantastic. It's so good. It's really one of the best.
Didn't it win an Academy Award? I think
probably in my heart, all the awards. But like one of the best movies of the century so far because it explores the science.
I know the framework,
the tech, but also it does a great job of just like exploring human emotions and human relationships, which is the sweet spot for a genre film is always, can you do the genre thing and can you like metaphorically say something really interesting about the nature of human experience? And Her does that really, really well. So it actually does explore these ideas of AI, but then it just sort of metaphorically explores the ideas about our relationships and the way we connect or relate or drift apart. And it can be brutal. But one of the things it points up is that it's going to be extremely hard for us to conceptually grok what these like higher order minds are capable of thinking of. And in not too long, they're going to blow right past the like human level intelligence train station.
If we're not already there. If we're not already there.
We could well be. And it's fun to think about like how AI might go about operating in the world if it existed and we didn't know about it. That can make you reach for a tinfoil hat, but it is a fun like thought experiment. What would it do if it existed and it was secret, and it was operating in the world while trying to maintain that secrecy, which is something the UFOs do. Do you want to hop in?
Yeah, I have no idea how it would interact. It's so fun to think about. I think we've been conditioned to think about artificial intelligence from Hollywood, and I go immediately right back to iRobot.
Well, this is our creative apparatus. This is one of the things that I love about the project of drama is its imagination. It is our way of playing out ideas about how the world might be, or how it could or should be, or how it is.
And cars are already here, right? Artificial
the self-driving cars, yeah.
I believe they test them in Los Angeles and Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
I saw Kim Kardashian in one, which must mean that
this is a real thing.
No,
my friends in LA take self-driving cars sometimes instead of
So
Uber.
that is kind of step one of our autonomy. And I always knew that whoever they are, if you had control over humans, you would not want them driving automobiles at high speeds.
A lot of people die. It's like
Because
1.3
they're prone to
million people
accidents.
a year.
Yes.
1.3 million people a year.
So if
in the
that
world.
is something you could take over and regulate even better using autonomy.
So you're proposing this idea that you're exploring this idea of like how an AI might interact with the real world.
So it's already kind of interacting on that scale.
Well, certainly we're building it. One thing I would look for if I were like trying to imagine whether AI did exist is like server farms. Like, would it be building large compute operations so that it could like exist independently? We would maybe try to look out for that in remote areas, but if it's being very crafty, then it would manipulate, which of course it will be very crafty.
It would have to be.
Then it would manipulate our systems to do that. And as I was saying that, like, we are building tons of compute, of course, like, because we know it's going to be very useful for us. Have you read the book Neuromancer by any chance?
No, I have not.
This is another big recommendation, really great sci-fi, and it's from the 80s, which is funny because actually it's upstream of The Matrix. Like, if you read it, you'll notice a bunch of stuff that's like, The Matrix just wholesale ripped this off. But it's also like before computing was really a thing, so it's fun to see like sci-fi ideas just like right before the dawn of the internet age.
Before everybody had a full grasp of what it was going to be.
Like William Gibson says in some interview that he had heard the word modem, but he didn't really know what he meant. It meant, so like he has his characters like we're going to need a lot of modems or something. Like there are ways in which it's very silly by comparison to our present reality. But sci-fi can help us think about the way reality is unfolding, and that has a story about like an AI sort of reaching through human apparatus to accomplish things in the real world,
and I think
which seems likely.
Advertising works for a reason, right? If I'm going to take my economic business standpoint, if I put this ad out and I'm going to get 29% of the people to drink Coca-Cola, that's brainwashing. So if now we take a super smart artificial intelligence, we feed it all of the information we've ever recorded digitally, and we say, predict this person or get some guy to do this crazy thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's going to be good at that.
It's going to be real good at that. And we are going to need to cultivate a lot of our own mental discipline if we're going to interact in an environment. Like, hypothetically, we were talking about division here, 3D and 5D. Humanity, I think, absolutely humans could decide to take different paths here, and we could end up with different types of human on Earth.
Absolutely, we're looking at a diversity explosion. People are going to change their bodies. They're going to incorporate more technology into their bodies. One way to bring this toward a conclusion and connect it with UFOs, I think, is that existing in a world with superintelligence is going to be similar to existing in a world with highly advanced non-human species, because it requires us to accept a place in the hierarchy that is no longer the top, and we can aspire to interact with that top from a sort of socio-political level, but we might have to accept that we're just not the coolest kids in town anymore, and that's going to be profound. It's a psychological project for all of us to engage with, but it also presents really interesting questions for us from an instrumental perspective in terms of how we're going to want to try to interact with the world. Are we going to just kind of allow higher forces to dictate the future, and we'll just say, well, okay, you're smarter than us, so we'll just go along? Or are we going to try to assert our own role in that, even though we're less competent in some meaningful way than these higher entities? I think that's a really interesting question, and it's fruitful ground to consider in the years ahead.
And I think it's exactly brings us full circle. What a professional you are, to the first place we picked it up. Where are we on the hierarchy of understanding? Are we at the top of the food chain, or are we somewhere in the middle, or are we maybe way back down at the bottom?
And how do you navigate that?
And how do you navigate that? And as we're ushering in this era of quantum computing, as we are now going to give birth to this thing that could potentially do problems that it would take us millennia to figure out, are we going to trust it and make it our God?
I don't know. I would say it requires both humility and careful thinking. And I think it's important to keep both of those in the mix. And if I could just say anything on the way out about how to approach this world, it's psychological health is like a great
Huge
building block for all of us. And then, as we learn more about spiritual health, you can incorporate some of those ideas too. But take care of yourselves. Go outside, interact with nature, be good to people that you meet, and
energy,
your
bring
friendships.
that energy with you.
Cultivate positive energy in your own life and for those around you. Do the good stuff is obviously good.
Unbelievable conversation, Caleb.
That was so fun. Thank you, man.
So much. There's so many good conversations you're having. Season 4 of WT UFO. Check it out. There's such a diversity of guests, and there's so much open-mindedness in the conversation, whether it's someone that's truly diving into one of the niche subjects like astrophysics or quantum mechanics or any of these astrobiology, any of this stuff, or whether you're having a conversation with someone who's telling you about an experience they had with entities, a personal experience that may or may not have happened. The open-mindedness with which you have these conversations is great. I cannot wait to listen to more of them. It has been a pleasure.
You too, man. So WTUFO on all the podcast players and on YouTube, and you can start from the website if you find that more convenient.
Go out to Etsy.
WTUFO.com.
Go out to Etsy. Check out his page.
Spacefare.etsy.com.
I'm going to include all the links below, so check those out in the comments.
Thank you so much, man.
And this has been great. Take back your consciousness. I love you guys. I'm out.
Bye.
That was awesome.
That was so great.